But how we doing, Kory? How we doing, Jack?
Much better than an hour ago. I was stressed out, as Kory would say.
I'm good. Obviously, all of our teams are connected with some sort of player or multiple players, so we all have some interest in this fight, and the craziness begins.
Yes. Jack, what have we seen so far?
Well, can we start with Joe Harris, Nick? The most important news. There hasn't been, I guess, confirmation on the number and the exact money. There's different numbers floating around, 3 years 48, 4 years 72. But basically, when you hear from Mark Stein, you know it's going to be credible. And sigh of relief from Nets fans and Joe Harris fans everywhere. They're retaining their man. You know, I think about 20, 30 minutes earlier, I heard Vince Carter on the jump say that the Atlanta Hawks are hoping to target him and throw a big offer sheet at him. Doesn't seem like that's going to happen. I think that they'll be getting someone like Bogdanovic, but massive sigh of relief from your boy down here. The OnlyFans content can't continue. Joe Harris aplenty for your boy that the J-Man JVT. It's
And if you guys don't know Jack, obviously there wasn't any other way for him to really start the show. Even if I asked him a question about somebody else, he probably was going to talk about Joe Harris. So we needed to get that out of the way first.
Go, Kory.
Hey, Joe Harris, your boy. You guys get your sharpshooter. Not even just a sharpshooter, as we mentioned. You know, he can attack the rim quite well. Provides a lot of versatility to that Nets offense. Been with the Nets for several years now. It's a good signing. You couldn't lose Joe Harris. Like no matter what happens with the James Harden stuff down the road, you had to make sure you had Joe Harris in terms of having that floor spacing and that offensive punch.
Yeah, obviously a great fit with Brooklyn, and we'll probably talk about it more if the details come out. But Kory, there is a lot of action going on with the Pacers. Tell us about it.
Well, I mean, right now there's been a lot of traction between a deal centered around Gordon Hayward to the Indiana Pacers for Miles Turner. Now, again, Gordon Hayward is from Indiana. He played at Butler in college. And he also had bought a house this past offseason in Indiana. He's made it clear that he wants to go to Indiana. That's his favorite target. And obviously he opted out of his $34 million player option with the Boston Celtics to become a free agent. And the issue is, of course, Danny Ainge. We know how Danny Ainge can be in terms of assets and what he wants in return for players.
As soon as he won the Brooklyn trade, he thinks that he'll win every trade from here on out. Like, he thinks that there's no way that he can lose a trade.
More or less. He's the guy who thinks he's the smartest man in every room he walks into. And, you know, again, his asking price right now for Gordon Hayward, who already opted out, and this would be a sign-in trade, is Miles Turner and or T.J. Warren. Well, no, Miles Turner and Victor Oladipo or T.J. Warren. And, again, if you're the Pacers, why in the hell would you do a sign-in trade and give up two of your three guys? It doesn't make any sense. So the deal right now is at a standstill. The Pacers are willing to give up Doug McDermott with Gordon Hayward, or with Miles Turner for Gordon Hayward, but they're not willing to part ways with T.J. Warren, who they now consider a cornerstone player, who is also just 26 years old. And then Victor Oladipo, there's not that much value. And also with Victor Oladipo, if you're going to trade, you're going to wait till the deadline so you can hopefully get more value for him. So it's Danny Ainge playing hardball with very little leverage. So maybe a deal doesn't get done, but if you're the Celtics, why would you want to lose Gordon Hayward for nothing?
Yeah, I mean, they still can retain him. I know that's still a possibility, so
right.
Keep that in mind as well. But I agree. I mean, if you're giving up Miles Turner and Doug McDermott, like, that's fine. And if maybe, you know, the Celtics wanted like a second-round pick or something, but trying to ask for T.J. Warren and Miles Turner is ridiculous. And, you know, the same thing with Miles Turner and Victor Oladipo. If it was Victor Oladipo and somebody else, I could maybe even understand that, given there's so much, you know, so much is unsure with his future in Indiana. And there's been a lot of talks about him being moved and his value really low. But T.J. Warren, on the other hand, we're talking about a guy with an all-time high value. Like, he's peaking right now, and if the Pacers were going to trade him, they'd want more than Gordon Hayward, who is somewhat of a liability still. Like, we're talking about a guy who's a very good player, but he has a hard time staying in the court after that ankle injury.
Because T.J. Warren's also on it's a steal of a contract. He's making $10 million a year, and he was arguably the Pacers' best offensive player last year. And we saw what he did in the bubble, of course. 50 points and dropping off. So I mean, I can understand why you would want a guy like T.J. Warren because he's only making $10 million. And that's an absolute steal for a guy with that much offensive potential. But again, like Danny Ainge, why? How do you think anyone's going to agree to that? And I also heard that Aaron Holiday was another piece, and it's maybe a little bit more talkable with Aaron Holiday, but again, Holiday's only 23 years old and definitely showcased last year that he has potential.
And Miles Turner and Gordon Hayward are in the same level of player. Like, I don't think one guy is that much better than the other. Maybe, you could have an argument Turner's better, you have an argument that Hayward's better. I could listen to both sides, but, like, not to the point where you need to add other big assets. But, Jack, what else is happening around the league? We've got a couple signings in so far.
Yeah, we got lots, and your boy's taken some handwritten notes. I know Kory likes to do that when we're doing Remembering the Office. I thought I'd do it today as well, do some prep for you lads, because you're doing some work behind the scenes. The big news is Miles Plumlee. Miles Plumlee or Mason Plumlee?
Mason.
Okay, I got it wrong. Mason Plumlee, former Nets legend, is going to be joining the Detroit Pistons on a 3-year, $25 million deal. Kory, is this the best deal we have seen in free agency history?
I mean, this is like the equivalent to Timothy Mozgov at the break a couple of years ago. Obviously not the same statue of money.
No, but it's honestly a good comparison, Kory.
I like it, man. I like it.
I mean, let's also look premises of why this doesn't make any sense. They traded for Dwayne Dedmon, and at least I was under the assumption that they would go hard pressed for a guy like Christian Wood. And going after Mason Plumlee now, the window for getting Christian Wood looks closed, which means Christian Wood is going elsewhere, which actually is really intriguing on where he might land. It just doesn't make sense because the Pistons are rebuilding, and you're going for Mason Plumlee, you're trading for Dwayne Dedmon. It doesn't necessarily make sense to me.
Yeah, I don't get it. I mean, if you are going to sign Mason Plumlee, that's okay, but just wait a little bit longer. Like, he's not a guy that's going to be getting a ton of attention. There's centers that are a lot better than him. If you're so worried, like, no offense to Mason Plumlee, like, he's been a solid center. He's a backup guy, good veteran, probably good leadership in the locker room, could kind of help set the culture in Detroit, but not anybody that I'd want to spend my cap space on right away. Like, if you're Detroit, you kind of want to sit there, and maybe even if you don't sign a free agent, like they've been doing, you take on these bad contracts and start racking up picks. They've done a really good job over that last couple of days. Why not continue doing that? Like, Mason Plumlee's not a game-changing player, especially at his age. Already 30 years old. It feels like he's still kind of young, but he's really not.
Yeah, it makes little to no sense to me. I don't know what's going on there. Troy Weaver is infatuated with Kentucky dudes or Team USA scrubs. I have no idea. It makes little to no sense.
A lot of roster cleaning. Like, I want to say Detroit has gotten rid of a lot of guys that were there prior. The only guy remaining, I want to say, is Blake and Sideku.
Rose.
Yeah, and Derrick Rose, yep.
Blake Griffin is the longest tenured Detroit Piston, and he joined the team in 2018.
He's the most likely one to be traded, him and Derrick Rose. So the chances are, you know what I mean.
It's crazy, and I think the funniest thing about the Plumlee Pistons move was that about 5 minutes earlier, Woj was tweeting, he's like, it's a hard market for centers at this point in time, and then 4 minutes later, he tweets that Mason Plumlee gets a freaking 3-year, $25 million deal.
In a bad market, too.
Crazy stuff. There's some other deals we can get to, guys. The first 2 deals were done. The Miami Heat, Myers Leonard, 2 years, $18 to $20 million. There's differing reports about that. And Goran Dragic for 2 years, $37.4 million. I believe that second year, Nick, you alluded to, as a team option. Any surprises at either of these deals, Kory?
I mean, the only surprise is the money figure for Myles Leonard. For a guy who really didn't even play that much in the rotation, especially because Kelly Olynyk also opted into his player option, so they have a lot of money locked in to the big man position.
I would assume that it's a team option for the second year as well for Leonard. If not a team option, it'd be a non-guaranteed deal, and he is a trade filler. He's a salary filler in a bigger deal. That's what he is. It's probably a 1 year expiring, so it just makes a lot of sense for the Heat. Jack, I know that this is kind of maybe a little bit before you were a Nets fan, but Chris Humphrey's contract, almost exactly the same thing. Literally the reason they overpaid him was so he can be a filler in a trade. Leonard knows that. He's happy to cash out because no one was paying him $9 million. He wasn't going to get the mid-level exception. He might get the taxpayer mid-level exception, but this is a guy, like you said, he didn't even really play in the postseason unless there was injuries. So his game, he's a solid player. He could be a solid backup, but he's not a guy that probably deserves $9 million. And the Dragic front, it's almost exactly what we discussed on the preview show when we talked about him. Likely to get that big 1 year deal. The second year with a team option gives them the flexibility. If they miss out on a big name, they could always keep him next year.
Yeah, 100% on the Goran Dragic front. It made sense. And also, he came out and said that he got a call from Jimmy Butler last night saying there will be physical violence if you don't re-sign with the Heat.
And I think that's a big reason why he re-signed is they're very good friends. And I remember listening to a podcast about Goran Dragic. I think I brought this up before. his relationship with Jimmy Butler is a big reason why he's felt so comfortable in Miami, and just like that overall mindset, like he has a similar mindset that Jimmy Butler has, so that's why they kind of get along so well.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got Nets Head in the comments saying allowing the Heat to renounce his rights if they get a shot at Giannis next summer. So that's a really good point made by him. Thanks for that comment.
And it's also an overpay to the extent where maybe next year you convince him to come for an underpay. You know what I mean? Like if you decline the team option, you could always bring him back. I mean, I know Dallas has been eyeing him for a while, so that'd be something to keep in mind. But like I said, he really likes Miami.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. Myers Leonard, one of the great shotgunners in the NBA today, clearly. What he showed in Orlando.
I think he's the best one, right? He has the crown. I mean, he took Jordan Clarkson one-on-one. He demolished him.
The dude's jacked as well. Like, he makes Kory look like, I don't know, a Pokashevsky. Like, he's just a jack dude. For those not playing along at home, there's a draft joke. Your boy's a draft kid now. But the Goran Dragic makes... Yeah, Poku. That's the best way of sort of putting it. Goran Dragic was number 10 on our free agent list, which we recapped and did a thorough deep dive on YouTube, at OTT Basketball on YouTube. So for him to re-sign, it made just all the sense in the world. And I think this is going to be the last deal that he gets, but he deserved it. He was so damn important to Miami Heat in the bubble when he got injured. And the heartbreaking footage of him trying to get back, and it was one of the worst moments we've seen. And injury suck in general. We know about that with the Klay Thompson stuff going around now. But, it makes a lot of sense for Miami. The Heat culture remains and will continue. And, Pat Riley's always keeping some things up his sleeve. He's a very shrewd executive. We all know that.
I mean, he got Jimmy Butler last year with nothing. Like, it didn't really make any sense. He was in a terrible cap situation. He pulled out, one of the top 15 players in the NBA. Jack, what else we got? Anything else happening? I know like I said, it's been a lot slower because of the tampering stuff. Like last year at this time, I think we probably already had 30 to 50 signings. But since the NBA released that memo because of the whole Bogdanovich trade between the Bucks and the Kings got shut down, just feels like teams are kind of scared to be extra early because there's really no advantage for them leaking stuff if they don't have to. As long as the players know and the agents know, they're pretty much set.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we can get to some Lakers news. The Wes Matthews signing for the biannual exception, am I correct, Nick?
Yeah, it looks like it's likely that. It also could be part of the mid-level exception. They could break that into pieces and sign him with that too. So I'm sure we'll find out the details as kind of free agency progresses.
Yeah, so he's signing for $3.6 million, basically the Danny Green replacement. What are your thoughts on the Wes Matthews signing, Kory?
I mean, he's the Danny Green / Avery Bradley replacement because both those guys aren't going to – obviously, Danny Green's not going to be there. He's in Philly, and Avery Bradley opted out, likely going to be the replacement for Wes Matthews, funny enough, in Milwaukee from everything we saw prior to free agency starting. It's a solid move for the Lakers. Wes Matthews, I got to watch him for half a season with the Pacers when he got traded there. He provides defense. He's a three-point shooter. I love the bow and arrow celebration of his. He's just a little bit inconsistent, obviously, at the back end of his career, but still a solid ad, and I think he's a good locker room guy.
Yeah, I think it's a good price for the Lakers, and they knew that they probably were going to get him before they traded Danny Green, bring him in. It's a slight downgrade, but three-point shooting, both inconsistent, and I would say Danny Green's still probably a better team defender. On ball, they're probably pretty similar at this point in their careers, so you got to give the Lakers a thumbs up. And the Avery Bradley thing will be interesting because I wonder if Milwaukee was really only targeting him thinking they had Bogdanovich, and now they need to use their taxpayer mid-level exception or mid-level exception somewhere else to get maybe a more of an offensive-minded player. And I know there were some reports that the Lakers think they still have a chance at retaining Bradley too.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I think we can look at it from the point of view of Lakers versus Bucks. Both of these teams are championship contenders going into next season. The Lakers have added Schroeder. Rondo seems on his way out as basically the Rondo replacement, and Wes Matthews is essentially the Danny Green replacement. Both are upgrades in my eyes. I personally see. Danny Green, it's a flip, but you're saving money, and that money, I guess, goes into Schroeder. And I think Schroeder is an upgrade over Rondo. Maybe not playoff Rondo, but normal Rondo in general. So I think that the Lakers have a leg up on the competition right now. I think that they're off season so far, and I think they're still at the mid-level exception if I'm not mistaken. Otherwise, like you mentioned, Nick, that unless the Wes Matthews deal is part of that. So I think the Lakers are making moves, and I've criticized Rob Pelinka in the past, but he's clearly making the moves and doing the stuff behind the scenes, and the Lakers are very poised to go back to back, at least at this very early point in time.
100%.
I'd rather pay Wesley Matthews $3.6 million than pay Danny Green $15 million.
Yeah.
For what they both provide. Like that's the best case scenario. Then, like you said, Jack, they trade for Dennis Schroeder, which is obviously going to help them with having another ball handler alongside LeBron James.
Just a lot of offensive pop for them that they just didn't have with Schroeder. Like, he's a guy that can go up and down. He can attack the paint. He's kind of hard to stay in front of for a lot of guys, just given his speed and quickness. So like you said, Jack, even if you think Wes Matthews and Danny Green is a wash, like, Schroeder is substantially better than Rajon Rondo at this point in his career. Like, there's no ifs or buts about it. You know what I mean? Like, Schroeder's he's a good player, and he's young. And, you know, he's also like a tradable piece, where a lot of guys they've had in the past, like, other teams wouldn't want him, where Dennis Schroeder could, you know, get some interest from somebody else.
We have NBA Asians in the chat saying Lakers need a defensive wing with the MLE. Off the top of my head, guys that come to mind, Mo Harkless and Jay Crowder are two names.
Yep.
Do you think that
Jeremy Grant, I think Jeremy Grant might be a little bit too pricey for them. If Jay Crowder is ring chasing, maybe. What do you think, Kory? Do you think that are those names, are those fits in Lakers land? What are your thoughts in general?
I mean, Crowder makes sense, right? Physical, play with LeBron as well for a brief stint in Cleveland. Didn't necessarily work out for him in Cleveland. I still feel like Jay Crowder ends up back in Miami, whether it's a discount or not. I think Jeremy Grant would be the best case scenario for the Lakers, but like you said, I think that's going to be a little bit too pricey. Who knows? Maybe they could steal away a guy like Justin Holiday, depending on what the price range is for a guy like Justin Holiday, who obviously we talked about in the preview series for the free agency, in which, he's a guy that I like a lot. Saw him with the Pacers last year. Shot 40% from three. And what else do you want from that guy who shoots like four a game?
And good defender.
And a good defender, exactly. And can guard, 2 and 3. So I think those are the couple names that stick out right off the bat. I still think the Lakers. I don't know. 'Cause I think the interesting question with the Lakers is, what do they do with the center position? Obviously, McGee opted in, but do you bring
Kory,
back...
I hate to interrupt. We've got the chat dropping us some dimes and some news. Woj has just reported free agent center Jahlil Okafor has agreed to a 2-year deal with the Detroit Pistons. Now, I will say, I initially saw the comments from our guys in the chat. Thanks for dropping them in there. And I'm like, oh, no, they're just joking. And then I look on TweetDeck and I'm like, oh, my God, it happened. What's going on in Detroit? Are they becoming the new New York Knicks, but with centers instead of power forwards?
That doesn't make sense, because the guys they signed are strictly centers. We're not even talking about 4 or 5s. We're talking about Dwayne Dedmon, purely a 5, Mason Plumlee, purely a 5 with almost no offensive game, and then Jahlil Okafor, purely a 5 with no defensive game. So now it's just like, I really don't know what they're doing there. I mean, I might think Dwayne Dedmon could be traded. Like I mentioned that to Kory yesterday, that I thought that was a possibility, but I don't know. Maybe it's kind of a flyer thing, and they're just hoping it could work out. How much was the Okafor contract for? I know you said 2 years.
It doesn't say. It just says 2-year deal. So we're still waiting on the figure for the Okafor deal. I mean, Okafor is still young. Now, again, I'm not saying he's good. We've already seen him at his best, right? Offensive potential down with the Pelicans. Showed he can score, 20-plus a game, while there's still no defense. It just feels like the Pistons went full on. We're taking the shit out of this season.
Maybe. I would think it's probably a vet minimum deal if I had to guess. Like, I think Okafor probably signed so quickly because they guaranteed him an opportunity to play. But that's the only thing that really could make sense in my eyes. Because like Kory said, there's still a little potential with Jahlil Okafor that he could turn into a solid backup big, at some point. But defensively, he's just not good enough to really get in rotation minutes now.
Our dude Alec, Blake Griffin will go from point forward to point guard this year. Basically,
it'll be like that Denver lineup we saw in the bubble.
Yeah, it's crazy stuff. Thanks for everyone interacting in the chat as well. It's helping us out a lot. We're trying to keep up, and I've got my news here, but everyone in the chat, thanks to everyone sort of dropping all the dimes and all the news there, because it's hard to keep up, especially on a day like today, even if it is a little bit slower.
Any questions are great too. Like, even if it's not related to free agency, trades, whatever, we're happy to talk about it.
Absolutely. We've still got plenty of news to go to. One that I wanted to bring in was, apparently the Sacramento Kings have interest in Hassan Whiteside. We're on the centers.
Where it started.
It's where it all began. And, Nick, you've brought to me that there's rumblings of De'Aaron Fox trades happening. What's going on in Sacramento, Nick?
Yeah, I honestly don't know what's going on in Sacramento, but there was interest, I want to say. They were exploring trades for De'Aaron Fox. I think it was Miami and New York that had interest, and there was a couple other teams that weren't listed, which would be kind of crazy. But I think, given what's happened over the last couple of days, like, we're talking about the Sacramento Kings that agreed to a trade without the player accepting the contract. So, like, are we really surprised about what's going on there? Hassan Whiteside, Not sure what the plan is with that because I'm just not a big Whiteside guy, so I would definitely not go after him early. If I got him on a cheap price, I'd be happy about it. I'd want him as my backup center. You see, if the Kings are probably signing him, it's probably to be a starter. Like, how does Hassan Whiteside fit with Marvin Bagley? Because obviously that's your power forward of the future. Bagley obviously operates inside, has a chance to develop that jump shot a little bit further. Can't say I love the fit. Can't say I love the fit for Hassan Whiteside really anywhere.
I don't understand it. I mean, what the Kings do makes no sense to begin with because you also got the rumblings that they've talked some De'Aaron Fox trades. Yep. So like I don't know what the Kings
Buddy
want
Hield trades.
Buddy Hield trades, right? Those have been in the rumblings as well. Like I don't know what the Kings' direction is. Again, this is also an organization that didn't get to draft Luka Doncic or Trae Young. They went with Marvin Bagley, who again could still turn into a good player. But the Kings front office time and time again shows us that they may just not be that competent with the decisions they make.
It is a new front office, so maybe we should give them a little bit of time.
I don't know.
I will say, I thought their draft was really good.
Yeah, they got a steal.
Tyrese Halliburton was an awesome get, but we've got some more questions that we've got to get to. We had @Gabe_Cats and Kory. We chatted about this a little bit, but I want you to bring the heat for this one, mate. We heard a little bit. We heard you temper it a little bit. You're on camera. I get that. But bring us the energy that you're bringing in the DMs.
Yeah.
The question from @Gabe_Cats is, Gordon Hayward thoughts? ? Come on, Kory, bring it, mate.
Listen, I'm a fan. Gordon Hayward is still a good basketball player. A guy who averaged 17 points per game, 6 rebounds, 4 assists on 50% from the field, 38% from 3, 85% from the free throw line. As you can tell, I've been looking at his stats a lot. I got him on top of my head. This is a guy who is still a very good basketball player. He was the 4th option in Boston. So you have to think in an expanded role, whether that's with the Pacers, maybe that's with the Hornets, maybe it's with the Hawks or the Knicks. He can still be, I think, a 2nd or 3rd option. I don't know where that puts you in terms of playoff competitiveness and if you get a high seed or not, but he can definitely play. I understand him wanting to get out. The only issue I have with Gordon Hayward is, where's the money figure at? If it's well over $20 million, I don't like it. If it's somewhere between 17 and underneath 20, I'm cool with it because he still has deserved that and earned that. But
what
again,
about 22?
22 is, I think, is like the borderline. Like, you're pushing it for me if you're at 22. If they're like the Pacers, if it's 22, I don't know if I want it.
It's got to be probably Knicks, 3 years, too, because you're assuming he's
right.
opting out of the 34. So it has to be something where he's at least making back some of that money he lost.
Right. And I would be okay with, 20 for me would be the comfort. 3 years, $60 million.
Mm-hmm.
I'm cool with that. And again, I think for Hayward, the biggest issue with Hayward is he wants to go to Indiana, and Danny Ainge, who doesn't have any leverage, is just asking for a leg and an arm. And to me, Danny Ainge's position in this is the wrong approach because I think Miles Turner benefits what the Boston Celtics are trying to do long term more than Gordon Hayward because you would get a defensive-minded center, you would get a guy who can stretch the floor better than Daniel Tice, and he's just a better upgrade over Daniel Tice. You may lose a little bit of rebounding and playmaking-wise, but then you're also given Kemba Walker, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum a bigger role and more volume in their offense, which should help them.
And, I mean, it's creating a ton of space inside. I know Tice would sit at the three-point line sometimes, but I think Turner's going to get more respect in that aspect. And then you're just talking about all the space for a Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum to attack inside. It's just kind of crazy. I mean, I would love the trade just from a team-building perspective for Boston. Then also the contract's tradable, too. It's like, Turner's making 18 this year and then 18 the following season. If you want to upgrade and maybe, say, make a Rudy Gobert trade, Marcus Smart, Miles Turner, that the money works right there. You know what I mean? Like, there's different options on the table. So I think, the Celtics are maybe being a little bit too greedy in the situation. They know that the Pacers can't sign Hayward without their help, but Hayward also can sign to other places, just the fact that he wants to go home to Indiana.
Well, and also if you're looking at in terms of winning, Hayward's best chance to remain with a winning situation is still going to be Boston or the Pacers. Right? I mean, the Hawks, maybe. There's a chance that they become competitive with Trae Young and some of the moves they're making. The Knicks, if they sign Gordon Hayward, you have to expect a bigger move, I think, coming down because you don't just sign Hayward with that group of players right now and expect to be anything. It wouldn't make any sense. And then the Hornets, I could see them going after Hayward because you did just draft Ball. You think LaMelo Ball is going to be the future. I know there's been rumblings of a Terry Rozier trade possibly. Devontae Graham was really good last year for them as well. PJ Washington, those guys. So I mean, maybe the Hornets do want to push for that last playoff spot. But again, I think the best case for Hayward is either to be traded to the Pacers or probably to re-sign with the Celtics.
What do you guys think it says about the situation in Boston, the fact that Hayward opted out of $34 million, which I personally thought was a no-brainer that he was going to accept it, most of the season?
It means that Indiana is a red state. Is that Republican? Is that what it is?
It is a Republican state, yes.
And Massachusetts is blue. That's all I'll say about that. MAGA Hayward doing his thing.
God damn, Jack.
Hey, you know what?
It's only like 9 o'clock in Australia. He's coming for murder.
Hey, 11:13. Thank you very much.
Okay.
We got a couple of quotes and comments in the chat that I want to get to, guys. We've got Alec. We'll get to Dwight Bacon to Orlando in a little bit, my friend. Pete Toll. Detroit racking up centers means likely Christian Wood is elsewhere. That is true. One thing I will say, J.E. Skeets, Isaiah Stewart, Tony Bradley, Dwayne Dedmon, Jahlil Okafor, Mason Plumlee. That's not even counting Blake Griffin, who is a center-sized dude as well.
Tony Bradley, I think, gets waived, but I forgot they drafted Isaiah Stewart. Like it just didn't click because it's so fresh. Like, what? You literally just signed 3 centers? What are you doing?
It's absolutely crazy, insane stuff. At Nets Head 11, dropped this news. Patrick Patterson, a guy who I've liked as a Nets target, has re-signed with the Clippers on a 1-year deal. Nick, I guess as the bigger Nets fan and more adept and more expert Nets fan on this podcast, does that disappoint you? What do you think about it from the Clippers side too?
I'm not really disappointed. Patrick Patterson, we talked about him on the offseason preview, Jack. You actually brought him up. I thought it would have been a solid fit. Hasn't really been the same since he had a couple knee injuries. I want to say he went from Toronto to OKC, and then when he signed in OKC, it just never really was the same player. He used to be a good three-point shooter, used to be a solid defender. Kind of is downgraded from there, but the Clippers get a guy that was on their team last year, kind of help maybe build up some of that chemistry, and he can fill in when you have some injuries.
Kory, any thoughts on Patterson as a Clippers rotation player?
I'm not a big fan of Patrick Patterson. I think his offense is really inconsistent, and I think he's a solid role player. I think he's solid, like an 8-9 man off the bench. I don't think you want him playing big time minutes. I thought, and this is why, because when he was on OKC with that Melo, Paul George, and Westbrook team, I was like, oh, this is gonna be good. Patrick Patterson's in the perfect role, and he just didn't have a good year at all.
He was terrible that year.
Yeah, he was terrible that year. I think every time I saw him shoot, he missed.
Yeah.
But obviously, with JaMychal Green opting out, you needed to bring back one of your bigs. So Patrick Patterson's a good guy to bring back.
We got a question, Nick, and you're probably the resident cap guru on the outlet / at OTG.
I don't want that title because the cap is so difficult still. I still find myself spending hours reading things and trying to figure out a small detail. But what do we got, Jack?
Now, we've got at Nets Head 11. Do you think the escrow situation is a big reason why Hayward opted out? Money this year means less than future years because you're only getting 60 cents on the dollar. It's a really good question, and I'm not 100% sure. Is it 40% escrow this year, 30%? But in future years, I'm assuming that will go down, and maybe we see a back-ended deal for a guy like Gordon Hayward in Indiana, Charlotte, New York, or whatever. What are your thoughts, Nick?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's actually an excellent point because of
Great point.
Yeah, because they're going to probably lose money this year, have to give more money to the owners, trying to make up for some of the stuff. So a longer-term deal, Hayward will actually make more money. And just let's hypothetically say Hayward had a pretty good season this year. He wasn't amazing. He wasn't all-star level, but I'd say he was probably close to fringe all-star. He was approaching that. Then he dealt with a couple injuries. There's a chance that he could get injured next season and never be the same player again and not get a chance at a long-term contract. Where we talked about a lot of guys wanting to wait to 2021 because there's going to be more cap space. Hayward doesn't really have that luxury because he could be one injury away from him being a bench player.
Right.
Yeah, we've got our dude Alec as well. We'll get to Bacon, but he's got even bigger news. Isaiah Hartenstein is being targeted by the Denver Nuggets. Any thoughts at all, Kory?
I was just funny that he was on the Rockets and they'd never used him ever. So I remember when he was drafted, I was like, wow, this kid has some potential. There was some KP light comparisons for him. I think it makes sense for Denver to get him, play on their G League team, let him develop a little bit. They've had a lot of success developing some of these long, lanky guys.
We've got Sham Sarania. A big is actually staying at a team that makes sense. Dwight Howard has agreed to a deal to return to the Los Angeles Lakers, sources tell The Athletic and Stadium. Kory, does it make sense? Thank you at NBA Asians as well. His comment, Dwight Howard returns to LA Lakers, Detroit Pistons devastated. At NBA Asians. Kory, what are your thoughts on Dwight Howard kicking around and staying in LA.
I'm just curious about the money. Because I thought I saw a quote the other day saying that he played for free this past year and that he's looking to make more money than he did last year. I think he's earned more money.
Wait, I got to tell you, I got to cut in real quick just because I saw a report that said that there's some thoughts out there that the Lakers might be the only team interested in Dwight Howard, which I thought was completely false and was trying to be leveraged from the Lakers, but maybe it was kind of true if that's the case.
It's possible still, right? I mean, so I think that's just my only wonder is what the deal looks like. But I think it makes sense for the Lakers because Dwight Howard, was crucial for them. Obviously, from a defensive aspect, coming off the bench, brought a lot of good energy. Seemed to gel really well with LeBron, with Anthony Davis. So I have no issue with this. I think this is a good move. And honestly, I wonder what this means. Obviously, JaVale McGee opted in, but I wonder what this means for
Jack's
McGee.
got something.
Like, Dwight, who gives a shit about Dwight Howard? As Alec alluded to, Fox, Shams Charania, Sacramento Kings young star De'Aaron Fox has agreed to a 5-year, $163 million maximum extension with a clause to reach the $195.6 million supermax. Sources tell The Athletic NBA, deal negotiated by his agent. Nick, you're our Sacramento Kings expert. What are your thoughts?
I'm surprised because it's funny that we just saw reports about exploring trades with De'Aaron Fox, and now they're just like, okay, we can't lose this guy, which makes sense because, hey, like, what other cornerstone pieces do they have in Sacramento? They don't really, because Marvin Bagley's been so injured, you don't know who he is. This is probably a little risky in terms of the money amount. Like, I don't have the contracts.
I think Fox is a dude.
I mean, I think he's very good, but like last season, the year before, he wasn't necessarily amazing. I'm not like super surprised by it, but they could have definitely probably waited a year and signed him next year when his restricted free agency contract's up. But I mean, what are you thinking, Kory?
I mean, I'm cool with it. I'm a big De'Aaron Fox fan.
I don't think they had a choice, really.
Right. I mean, obviously, I was confused by we shit on the Kings when we heard the reports that he might be a guy they're looking to trade because it didn't make any sense. So maybe I'll backtrack a little bit on talking about the Kings organization because I think giving him this extension makes all the sense in the world. He's an extremely talented point guard, can beat you in a lot of different ways, extremely fast, versatile. I just hope they get the right pieces around him and they don't waste them or they don't end up trading him down the road because I think the Kings, if they want to become relevant, it starts with De'Aaron Fox, so I'm glad they locked him up.
Do you guys think he's 100% going to guarantee turn into a $30 million a year player?
I think we're sort of looking at... I'm more confident with De'Aaron Fox than I was when Jamal Murray signed this deal. That's the comparison point that I make. And I think De'Aaron Fox has potential to be one of the best point guards in the league. Not the best, but he has elite skills. He's pace. He's a great finisher. I think his three-point shot is quite good. I think he's a leader. I think he's a great personality, and he can be he's a franchise player. And I think that you pay for potential, and it's not necessarily a no-brainer deal like it will be with Donovan Mitchell, Bam Adebayo, and Jason Tatum, but it's as close as it can be. Nick, what are your reservations with it?
Three-point shooting. He's not a good three-point shooter. Well, his first year he shot 30%, last year he shot 37%, and this year he shot 29% on 3.6 attempts. So anytime I see a point guard that doesn't have a good three-point shot, there's a little bit of concern. Not to say that I don't think he could turn into it, but I'm not going to say that I'm probably not as high on De'Aaron Fox. If he gets that three-point shot, definitely could be a top 5 point guard because of the athletic gifts and the talent he does have. But I think in the modern NBA, you need a guy that's going to provide that three-point shooting and give you that spacing, unless you have other pieces on your roster that kind of fit perfectly, like we've seen in like a Russell Westbrook situation. If you have a center on the floor, it can make that player less impactful. Even looking at John Wall, who's a little bit better three-point shooter, but that's always been kind of something that's made it a little bit easier to defend him. Not that I have no confidence that De'Aaron Fox can get to a $30 million a year player. I'm just not 100% locked in.
The jump shot is obviously a concern, especially from the three-point range. And like you said, it could be. Update from Shams. No deal is done. He's not officially a Laker. He's considering all of his options.
Bang! That's some Bogdanovich shit.
Wait, so we're talking about Dwight Howard?
Yep, Dwight Howard.
Yeah, he said no to the deal. He's apparently still weighing options.
Dude, at NBA Asians is providing some absolute flames. Detroit is back in the action. Oh man, we're getting some absolute flames for some of our comments. Thanks for everyone tuning in, by the way.
I'll just say this real quick on the Lakers front. There was a lot of reports about them having interest in Tristan Thompson. like in using their mid-level exception for him or something like that as, you know, a center that's like an upgrade over McGee, you know, obviously has a relationship with LeBron. So it makes a little bit, maybe like the Lakers also didn't want to put money out for Dwight, and it was like, hey, we'll give you the veteran minimum again this year, and Dwight didn't want it, so he was looking to other places.
Not to mention, Kardashians are from L.A. He's closer to his girl, closer to home. Even though I think they might have
That's what
broke
LeBron
up
wants, get that team infected.
Yeah, it's also not the first time we've seen Dwight accept a deal and then backtrack on it, right, Nick?
Yeah. It's Dwightmare.
Yeah.
Dwightmare Part 2, except this is like the worst sequel. It's like Godfather 2 or Toy Story 2. Toy Story 2 is not a good film.
So
Sorry,
I got a question for you guys. Because some reports did come out prior to free agency starting about the fact that Fred VanVleet is probably going to re-sign with the Toronto Raptors. You know, obviously still going to take some meetings, take some offers. Where do you guys think Fred VanVleet ends up? Do you think he ends up back in Toronto, or do you think he's gone?
Jack, you hit this.
Yeah, I initially thought that, you know, a team like New York and Detroit would be waiting in the wings, and I think New York still can. It's not like they drafted a point guard; they drafted another goddamn power forward. And the Pistons, well, he's not a center, so he's clearly not going there. They also did get Killian Hayes in the draft, who I think makes a lot of sense for them. It seems to me that the market has shrunk for Fred VanVleet, and he was I believe our number 2 guy behind Anthony Davis in our unrestricted free agency list that we did on YouTube. So it's interesting because there are so many sign and trades, machinations happening behind the scenes, and there seems to be it's just it's crazy what the teams that have money, clearly, you know, the Atlanta Hawks, while I think Fred VanVleet would be a really nice fit there, there's no way they're giving him $25 million. I think that they'd rather go for a Bogdanovic and another guy to add up to that $25, $30 million to support a Trae Young. It seems to me that he'll probably get around $20 million to kick around with Toronto, and I think that's a good deal. You know, I think that, you know, they drafted, you know, I think they drafted Malachi Flynn as well, who is Fred VanVleet 2.0. He can be a mentor to him and show him how to get it done. I see it being just a go back and get it done deal in Tampa, I think it is now, if I'm not mistaken.
Tampa Bay.
Yeah.
Wait, so just on the Dwight Howard front, so wait, is that not real? Maybe it's not real.
What do you got? Just throw it out there, Kory. Throw it out there.
Apparently he tweeted, "I'm staying right where I belong, Laker Nation. I love y'all. Purple and gold never gets old." But then deleted.
I did see that. Yeah, because David Aldridge tweeted it out. Is that what you saw it as well?
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't think it's fake unless he got spoofed and we're getting spoofed as well. But it looks like Dwight thought he was gonna go back to the Lakers.
Maybe he thought the number was a little bit higher or something like that, and it wasn't.
Big deal. We got Alec and Atnet's head 11. Jeremy Clarkson. Jordan Clarkson, 4 years, $52 million with the Jazz.
Ooh.
Now, that seems a little bit of an overpay, do you think, Kory?
It does for a guy who felt like he couldn't even stay in a rotation, right, 2 years ago, right? I mean, Jordan Clarkson really popped off, obviously, with the Utah Jazz last year in that 6-man role, provided a ton of offense for that Jazz team who was desperately looking for it when Bogdanovic went down. It does feel like quite a bit of money for a guy who gives you more offense than anything else. Obviously, he's not a great defender by any means. But if you're the Utah Jazz in a small market, you are kind of limited in terms of wanting to keep certain players. And I feel like they felt like they couldn't lose a guy like Jordan Clarkson. Again, you're probably going to lose Mike Conley in the future because, again, he's got 1 year left on his deal, I believe.
At like 30-something mil.
So, right. So it does make sense for the Utah Jazz, but it does feel like a slight overpay.
Yeah, I don't think there was much money out there. You think you maybe could have sat on it. $13 million a year for Jordan Clarkson isn't terrible in like the normal climate. You know what I mean? Like his teams are overpaying on a regular basis, and it's Utah. It's not like an exciting spot to live. But given that nobody else has cap space, and the teams that do have cap space, would they be that interested in Jordan Clarkson? And a lot of them, all they could offer, like in terms of other contending teams, would be just a mid-level exemption around $9 million. So it just feels like maybe a slight overpay, but he did really pop off for them when he came to Utah. Like he got himself in the 6-man conversation, and he was really good for them. And he had some nice playoff moments, but like you said, Kory, defensively there's some major issue there.
Yeah, it is certainly an overpay. He has like Lou Williams vibes where, can he be out there in closing minutes in key crunch games? He was really good for, like you guys alluded to, in Orlando. I think the fact that they offloaded Bradley and Davis, certainly allowed them to create that space to extend Jordan Clarkson. I think it is an overpay. I think that mid-level exception is probably a bit more what I'm thinking. We have, Nets head 11. Joe Harris greater than Clarkson. How much do you expect Joey Buckets to get? 4 years, $70 million. We alluded to at the start, Nick and myself, that we've seen 4 years, 72 reported by Mike Scotto. We've had people sort of tell us that there could be 348. Now, we know that Joe Harris is clearly better than Jordan Clarkson, but the money and the machinations of the luxury tax and everything that's going on there with Joe Tsai will clearly affect that. But
I would expect almost at least 15 mil for Joe Harris, just given that there's so much interest from other teams and that. I know we've heard the 12 million number. I don't think that's very realistic. 13, I think, is kind of an underpay. Something between 15 and 18. I think that 18 would probably be at the top of the level if another team is forcing the Nets to pay that number. In my eyes, 15 and 16 probably makes more sense. And we've heard 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, it's obviously it's been semi-confirmed, so there's a weight lifted off of all Joe Harris Stan's shoulders, including my own. So now I can talk shit about the Detroit Pistons and the Utah Jazz about their deals. So I guess we can get to some other stuff, guys. And the Dwayne Bacon, Alec, if you're still kicking along with us, my friend, Dwayne Bacon at the Orlando Magic for 2 years. Now, this deal obviously doesn't necessarily move the needle that much, but Kory, what are your broader thoughts about the Orlando Magic? Is this signaling a rebuild of some sort? Do we see a fire sale? We see Evan Fournier, a guy we talked about in our free agency series. He opted in. Could he be used as a trade piece? Is Aaron Gordon gone? What are your broader thoughts on the Orlando Magic?
I think you just touched on. I think it means Evan Fournier is on the move. I almost got his name right, I think.
That's probably your best ever European pronunciation that I've ever heard. Now that's saying something.
It was his facial expressions and the mannerisms on his face were even right. It was who's this guy?
I had to go in that one with complete confidence. So I think signing Dwayne Bacon maybe is just a move just in case we end up losing our guy. We have someone in the wings. But again, Dwayne Bacon is going to be 25 years old. Hasn't necessarily proved that he belongs on the court in the NBA yet. Struggled last year in a limited role with the Charlotte Hornets. But again, still a young guy. I don't think it's the worst move for the Magic. But again, it does feel like the Magic are trying to figure out what their next big move is. Is it going to be, trading away a guy like Aaron Gordon? Who's going to be the backcourt of the future with Markelle Fultz? I think because again, they've been one of the teams that were tied to some sort of exploratory talks with the Rockets about a Russell Westbrook trade as well. So I think the Magic are just trying to feel out what their next move is.
And Fournier's had interest in trying to get his way to, I think it was the Clippers or the Suns, trying to get traded to that location. I'm not sure Dwayne Bacon signing signals anything. It could just be kind of a flyer on a young guy, fill at the end of your roster. Maybe you can turn him into something. They've had a little success in getting some good defense out of wings there. So I'm not really thinking it's a big move because it's probably just a veteran minimum contract. But good for Dwayne Bacon staying in the league. I think he has some potential there, and he could turn into a solid bench player.
Yeah, I think he can be a rotation guard in this league for a long time, as a backup and contributor. And I think Orlando is a good situation for him to. Tony Jones, via The Athletic, Derek Favors has committed to the Utah Jazz. There is some pretty strong rumors about that, Derek Favors getting interest elsewhere. Kory, your thoughts on Favors, I guess, returning to the Utah Jazz, other than I got completely confused. I'm just he's playing for the Pelicans, but it says the Jazz. Heading back to the Jazz, Kory, what are your thoughts? Playing alongside Rudy Gobert again, that fit wasn't a match made in heaven. We know that.
Favors, again, he's in the weird in-between because he's, too slow to play the power forward in today's NBA and doesn't provide enough rim protection and, just defense in general to be a small ball five, which we saw last year with the New Orleans Pelicans. So I don't hate it for the Jazz perspective. He would know the system. Him coming back off the bench in a 20 to 26-minute role probably isn't the worst thing for them, especially after they trade away a guy like Tony Bradley. So I don't hate the move if he was to go back to the Utah Jazz. And I don't understand necessarily why the Pelicans would want him back either. I think maybe it'd be best for the Pelicans to look to give Jackson Hayes more minutes and maybe find a different vet. But it's interesting to see where favors go. But he was a guy last year I thought where his value took a hit.
Yeah, New Orleans has had a lot of interest in Aaron Baines. He has a relationship with Van Gundy, coached him when he was in Detroit. That seems like a very likely move, but I kind of like Favors going back to Utah. He actually had success there. Like you said, New Orleans was a real struggle. He was healthy. He was never really healthy, never had a chance to really practice with them. I don't think he ever kind of got in the vibe, and then just being so many young players and kind of being a veteran that's used to playing in Utah with like an established defensive system, I think it was tough for him. So I think coming off the bench in Utah should be good, and they should be able to get a couple minutes on the floor with him and Rudy Gobert. It's not a pretty fit, but they can probably get away with it like 10 minutes a game or something like that.
Yeah, I would likely say for the MLE, 3 years, or Alex in our group chat, 3 years, $30 million with Utah.
Yep.
So yeah, that's around the sort of MLE. Yeah, I think he's a good culture fit as well. I think that sort of doubling down on what makes Utah good, and I think that they were a shot away from beating the Denver Nuggets, who ultimately were in the Western Conference
without
Finals.
one of their best players.
Without one of their best players. So I think that the Utah Jazz are right there or thereabouts, and solidifying what you have, you can certainly do worse. Now, obviously, they need to fill out that rotation because I think that their depth isn't necessarily amazing, but you can certainly do worse than because obviously you lose Bradley, you lose Davis, or you let them go, and you add back in.
They knew he was coming for probably a month.
Yeah, you would assume so. Tampering alert, and it's a small market team. Get on them, Adam Silver.
I just want to say this: the whole tampering thing and attacking the Bucks is just stupid. Like attacking the Bucks and the Kings, not only because tampering is a normal thing, and like it's been brought up a million times, the Lakers and LeBron and Anthony Davis and all that stuff, that was pretty damn public. We all knew about it. But the fact that it's an express offseason. Like, literally, we are playing basketball on December 22nd. Well, we're not playing basketball. The players are. But you know what I mean? Like, everything just happened so quickly, and they're going to expect them not to communicate. That's just kind of ridiculous in my eyes.
Yes, it's being reported $30 deal from Shams Charania, but a $27 million deal from Tony Jones. So $27 to $30 million.
It could be 27 guaranteed and 30 with bonuses.
I think, and I think as well, the third year is a team option, if I'm not mistaken. I'll have to... Yeah, I think it is a third year. It might be a team option.
That's like my favorite type of contract. If you can get a team option on a contract, that is just beautiful.
Look, it's a 3 years, $30 contract. I think that's the Tillman Furtada special. He'd kill to have someone for that cheap on his roster.
Yo, don't you see, Jack? They're actually making a ton of moves. Wink, wink.
Yeah, it's so they're willing to get uncomfortable, and then 12 hours later, things completely change.
Well, now it's a fluid situation, and things are moving quicker than expected.
Should we get to some before we get more news as we get along? There's news around Westbrook, there's news around Harden. Should we have some Houston Rockets chatter?
Sure. What do you want to hit?
Let's go with Harden because we've got the two Nets dudes on here. I'm less confident than I was. And the more I hear outside rumblings, the more I think that Philly is going to swipe in and Daryl Morey is going to be like, you know what? Ben Simmons. See you, mate. And if that happens, the Nets can't compete with that. And but in saying that, if Philly doesn't offer Ben Simmons, the only other team that I think is in the running right now at this point in time is the Brooklyn Nets. And I don't know if any other teams are going to be willing to get in there. Michael Porter Jr. I've mentioned before on a previous Brooklyn Buzz. So I think right now we've got a two-horse race. The Brooklyn Nets are certainly leading, but the Philadelphia 76ers are hanging in the back, and are certainly going to be willing to jump in for him. I don't think that James Harden is going to be traded anywhere but a contender. Obviously there's plenty of teams that have cap space, as we've got some people in the chat, chatting to us and at NBA Asians. Nets need a third team to give Houston a premium asset. I did see Billy Reinhart sort of talk about a three-team trade with the Chicago Bulls about Zach LaVine and then Karis LeVert going to Chicago and then Dinwiddie and Allen and LaVine going to Houston. At Nets Head 11 thinks Golden State are in the race. I don't think anymore with the Klay Thompson injury. But Nick, what are your thoughts, I guess, on Harden, and then we'll get to Kory and I guess some Westbrook chatter?
Yeah, I think the one thing the Nets have benefiting them against Philly is that Tillman Fertitta isn't going to want to deal with Daryl Morey.
It's pronounced Furtada.
Furtada. There you go, Jack. Your boy Furtada. But I don't think he's going to want to deal with Daryl Morey. Like, he just left. It's his, he just employed this guy. He said he didn't want to be there anymore. He went to another team a few days later, is already making moves. Like, does he really want to trade James Harden to Philadelphia and watch them win a championship? Highly unlikely. He's an egotistical guy. He's already very stubborn about trading James Harden in the first place. So, like you said, I'm not as confident the deal is going to progress, as we expected. Like, I thought it was going to get done sooner the way the reports were coming in, but now it feels like Houston is okay kind of holding on. But at the end of the day, like I've said to you before in the buzz, like at some point James Harden is going to be traded from Houston. Is it this offseason? Is it the deadline? Is it next offseason? We don't know. And the other thing we do know is the Nets are favorites just because that's where James Harden wants to go. The Nets don't have the best package, but that's where Harden wants to go, and that's where he's the most valuable. Where the other team's trading for him, they just have that lingering question mark. Does James Harden want to come here, or is he going to end up wanting to go to Brooklyn? What do you got, Jack?
I've got Jeremy Grant. Adrian, is this true? Let me just double check that there's the blue tick. No, it's not the blue tick. Sorry. Thought there was the blue tick.
Kory, what do you think about James Harden?
Go.
I think it's an interesting situation because, again, he's signed for another 3 years. So it's not like his free agency is up and coming. But, again, if you're a superstar, this is the player empowerment movement. So if a player doesn't want to play for your organization and he's telling you where he wants to go, by no means are the Rockets, they don't have to give him to the Brooklyn Nets. They don't have to decide to send him there. They don't have to send him to the Sixers either. If any team offers a giant package to James Harden, if I'm the Rockets, I'd probably trade him there. And if he doesn't want to play, he's going to lose money. Again, I think it just depends. Now, of course, you would prefer to send him somewhere to make him happy, I think, but I don't
think they care about making him happy, but I think also if you're a team, you're not going to offer a big package if you don't think James Harden wants to come there. Like it's similar to the Kawhi Leonard situation, not to the same extent because there is that extra year. It's a 2-year contract, third year player option, most likely going to opt out because he's a good player and they're going to get a bigger contract. But it's a similar situation to Kawhi where, yeah, they can trade him to another team, but they're literally probably going to get 50 cents in the dollar, where maybe the Nets aren't giving you a dollar for a dollar, they're giving you something more like 75 cents, but still that's the question you have to make. Or that's a decision you have to make.
Right. I mean, again, because Kawhi didn't say the Raptors were one of his teams, right?
They were not.
Right. Obviously, that worked out in the best case scenario, and he still left. But I think, like, if you're a team that's borderline, like I'm trying to think, like, if you're the Nuggets, for example, if you put together a package for James Harden, Bol, Michael Porter Jr., whatever, to make the work, and you were to bring in James Harden, and you have 2 years of running it with Nikola Jokic, James Harden, and let's say Jamal Murray. Maybe you have to trade Jamal Murray or whatever the case may be. I don't think if you're the Nuggets, that's like the worst move to make. I wouldn't make it because I think your future is set up better without Harden. But like I think there are certain teams that are like right on the cusp that I could see talking themselves into making a deal if they know they still have Harden for 2 years.
It's a risky game, but I definitely could see it. I mean, even if Boston wanted to do it, or they wanted to trade Jaylen Brown and then have James Harden and Jason Tatum.
They would want P.J. Tucker, James Harden, and somebody else as well, and only give them, I don't know.
Kemba Walker.
I will say, we've had 3 or 4 people on Twitter who have fallen for a fake Woj bomb in regards to Jeremy Grant, including one of our very own at OTG Basketball.
It's literally the worst thing. Why do people spend time making fake accounts? I just don't understand.
Hey, trolling for the sake of trolling. It's fun because it's fun to catch people.
How many fake accounts does he have, Kory? He's got to have a couple if he's talking like this.
You got out there, don't you, Jack? Next time someone comes at me angry about a Brooklyn Nets take, I'm gonna know it's you.
You might as well be a closet Nets fan anyway. You probably got closet Nets stan accounts.
Open that closet, there'll be some Nets stuff in there.
I got 3 Brooklyn Nets underneath my bed.
There we go. Some recent news, guys. Harry Giles is leaving Sacramento. Obviously, I don't think they offered they took on his 4th-year team option, and he's going to explore the market. I'm a big fan of Harry Giles. I think that he's got some real upside. Kory, do you agree? What are your thoughts on Harry Giles?
I mean, I like Harry Giles. Obviously, a guy who was really well sought out coming out of high school, looked to be the next best thing. A lot of knee injuries kind of derailed the beginning of his career, but I still think there's a lot of potential there. I don't think he played off with the Sacramento Kings. He was in a limited role, and we know the Kings had a logjam at that power forward position. I think that's a guy in general. I think a lot of people, his value might be low right now. You get him for a steal and maybe he pops off. I'm a fan of Harry Giles.
Yeah, he still needs some development, but he showed some nice flashes with the Kings. With some very nice passing. There's some hope for the jump shot. Decent body. The problem with him is he probably is more of a power forward. Not really doesn't have that full center frame in terms of size, and his skill set probably fits best at center until he fully develops that 3-point shot. But I don't mind it. I think it's a good flyer for a lot of teams.
Woj just tweeted, among contenders in both conferences, an aggressive early pursuit to lure free agent Serge Ibaka out of Toronto, sources tell ESPN. Of course, the Raptors have strong interest in keeping him too. Nick, we saw his KD's brother comment on Serge Ibaka's post. It was a really cool post, him sort of in the plane saying, where am I heading to? And he said, Brooklyn. Do you think there's some insider information, some tampering from KD's bro?
Yeah, we know he's been contacting Serge Ibaka trying to get him come to Brooklyn, but like you said, I saw another report that said up to 10 teams are interested in Serge Ibaka, so that's a third of the league is trying to sign Serge Ibaka. That friendship with KD better be strong. Like I said to you, maybe he gets a show in the boardroom or something like that for KD's company, but I don't know. It's going to be tough for him to end up in Brooklyn, especially if teams are offering money, and obviously Toronto could offer him a big one-year deal just to get him to stay and then keep that cap space for next year, so I'm not really sure. I think Serge Ibaka is getting a lot of hype right now, given the market is so slim in terms of very good players.
Yeah, I'm a massive Serge Ibaka fan. We obviously know the ties to KD. We've heard that he's luring him. He would have to take massive unders, but we did just speak about as well the escrow and the fact that money doesn't have the same, or the contracts don't have the same weight and financial benefits as they would in the future. So whether he's just taking a one-year deal, seeing if the Nets can win the chip this year, and then cashing out in a more cap-friendly and player-friendly environment next year, I think Serge Ibaka would be, he's a Nets Twitter darling with that many shirts of him on there. He would fit in ideally at the 5. He could probably play a little bit of 4.
It would probably mean a Jared Allen trade was incoming.
It certainly would. I would prefer a DeAndre Jordan trade incoming, but unfortunately that won't be the case. Kory, what are your thoughts on Serge Ibaka? Friendships do matter. We know this. Friendships matter. Kory, speaking of friendships mattering, what are your thoughts on Serge Ibaka, Brooklyn and beyond?
He's got to be one of the most interesting names on the market for the fact that he is, a stretch big, and he's played so well for Toronto. He has the playoff experience. He's a champion. And, for culture purposes, he seems like a great locker room guy. He had that entire Toronto Raptors locker room wearing scarves, right? This is a guy that's just easy to love. Him and Kevin Durant, when they had that little, cooking interview or whatever, they're talking about the NBA Finals. That was one of my favorite little videos that come out from last year, or was it the year before? Whenever it came out, it was good content. Serge Ibaka is a guy that I think almost like you mentioned, right? 10+ contenders are interested in him. That doesn't surprise me at all. If the Celtics were to miss out on Miles Turner from a Gordon Hayward trade, I could see the Celtics wanting a guy like Serge Ibaka. Yeah. He would fit in. Like you said, the Nets. He makes a lot of sense with the Nets. He has the ties with Kevin Durant. Going back to Toronto, if he wants to run it back, obviously Toronto's going to be playing in Tampa Bay this year, right? We found that out too. Toronto Raptors will be the Tampa Bay Raptors this upcoming season.
We the South.
I think Serge.
What?
We the South.
Yeah. I'm perfectly cool with wherever Serge ends up, because I think no matter where he goes, he's going to make an immediate impact.
It'll be interesting too, is because Serge is a good player, like I said, but he could literally have an impact on the playoff race next year, because two teams matching up would both probably be trying to get his services. So the difference in that playoff series could literally be Serge Ibaka maybe as a starter for the Celtics or a bench pick for somebody else. But very interesting name. Anything else happening, Jack, or is it starting to slow down?
It's slowing down a little bit, but there's some other news I wanted to bring up. KCP has been linked to the New York Knicks. Nick, what do you think about KCP? Do you think that there's some validity to that rumor, or could it be KCP using the Knicks as leverage to drive up his money in Los Angeles?
Yeah, I think it's more so leverage, but there is a small possibility KCP could end up there. Still relatively young, fills a need for them, gives them a veteran, 3-point guy, plays some good defense, but I still think the most likely scenario is ending back it up in LA, because the Lakers really can't afford to lose him. We talked about some of the other moves they made, but if they lost KCP, that leave a major hole because he's still that athletic wing that Wesley Matthews just isn't. Like, he's great at kind of chasing guys around the perimeter, where, just losing that on that Lakers team I think would be pretty impactful, especially considering their three-point shooting still isn't great. We mentioned Dennis Schroeder, still an upgrade over Rondo in terms of shooting. Wesley Matthews along the same lines as Danny Green. Losing KCP, who might have been their best three-point shooter last year, would be a loss.
Yeah, I mean, you can't afford to lose KCP if you are the Los Angeles Lakers. Of course, we mentioned Avery Bradley gone, Danny Green gone. Obviously, they won a ring without Avery Bradley even being in the bubble. But you still need. I mean, KCP was the third best player in the NBA Finals. But from an offensive point, he was knocking down all of his shots, played some really good defense, a lot of hustle. He's an important piece of this team, like you guys mentioned. You can't afford to lose that guy, especially from the position he's at.
The only way I could see them willing to lose him if they were able to make a move for Bogdanovic. They were one of the teams interested in him, and that might be the trade-off they're willing to have. And they feel confident enough with their defense being good with the bigs behind them that, hey, we could have some maybe more liabilities out there, and it'd help us out offensively.
An interesting tweet from Rob Mahoney of The Ringer. A little something to keep in mind with Derek Favors leaving the Pelicans for the Jazz. We talked about it from the Jazz side, but not really from the Pelicans side. New Orleans, when Zion and Favors played together, a plus 11.5 net rating. New Orleans, when Zion played without Derek Favors, a negative 5 net rating. Kory, how do you think Favors leaving New Orleans affects the Pelicans? And obviously Stan Van Gundy has a huge defensive mindset. Do you think this is going to hurt them as much as the stats say so?
I don't think it's going to hurt them as much as the stats say. Like I said, I don't think Derek Favors was that good last year. So I think you can find a replacement. I'm not sure who that replacement is, but I think you can find someone who it might just be as simple as I'm trying to think of who a defensive-minded center on the market is.
Aaron Baines.
Aaron Baines, right? Like you mentioned it before, Nick. Sorry, you already said
Favors is better than Baines, and I'm a big Baines stan.
I don't think last season he was.
Agree,
I think
not defensively.
Derek Favors was very bad last season. He just wasn't up to his standards. In the bubble, he was absolutely terrible. And I'm not saying I think Derek Favors is better than the player he was last season, but last year I would say Aaron Baines was a better player.
I'm just saying in general in a vacuum because I think Favors, when healthy, is better. Is that something that is worth discussing? Because I think I would probably prefer to have Baines because I have a better idea of what I'm getting. I mean, I kind of understand with Favors, but like Kory mentioned before, he's almost like that in between because his rim protection really isn't great for a 5, where either is Baines, he's not an elite rim protector, but his positioning is better and he has more physical size and toughness to his game. So I don't know. It kind of depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for more of an offensive punch from your center, I think Derek Favors will give you more. He's a better inside finisher, has a little bit of his offense to his game, where Baines is kind of giving you layups and shooting some of those open threes. So, I could see, I think probably in a vacuum, Favors is a more talented player, but I think Baines might be a better fit on more teams, if that makes sense. Yeah. No, that's fair. And look, I just think Favors is just really solid in what he provides the team, in terms of the intangibles. I know he had a really poor season. It sort of reminds me of Al Horford in a way. I think health, and I think it was a bit of an aberration of his. And I expect him to probably get back to somewhere near his best in Utah. Bobby Marks has reported the numbers on the De'Aaron Fox extension, Nick, and not sure if you're going to like these numbers because we know you're a big Fox hater.
I'm not a hater. I'm not a hater for really anybody in the league except, I don't know.
Kyle Lowry?
I was going to say Kyle Lowry, but I still respect his game. His antics annoy me, but I still respect who he is as a player. So
yeah, he's got a fat ass, so who cares? Bobby Marks has reported 21-22, 28.1 million. The following season, 30.4 million. The following season, 32.6, 34.8, 37.1, which adds up to the $163 million. It increases by 30% if he's a first-team All-NBA, 28% second-team, 26% third-team All-NBA. That's a question that I'll bring to you, Nick. Is there any chance we see during this extension over the next 5 years, De'Aaron Fox make an All-NBA team?
It's a lot of predicting. You know what I mean? Because I have to predict where De'Aaron Fox is going to be, how the rest of the league looks. Is he ever going to be a top 6 guard? No. Right?
I think he could be.
You're saying between because you have to assume shooting guards and point guards. You're saying point guard, shooting guard, point guard, shooting guard, or point guard, point guard. One of those is probably going to be a shooting guard. You know what I mean? It's not going to all be point guard. So I think maybe he could be a top 5, top 6 point guard, maybe. But I don't think he'll. For him to get an All-NBA too, the Kings would have to have a really good season. Like, that's just usually part of it. You know what I mean? Like, you don't typically, like, for example, like, Trae Young didn't make an All-NBA team, right? Like, he didn't make one, and he was very good.
Bradley Beal as well, right? Didn't
Yeah.
Bradley Beal get
Bradley Beal had literally a historic offensive season, and he didn't make one. So, unless the Kings turn something around, I say it's probably unlikely that De'Aaron Fox ends up on All-NBA. Maybe I'm being a hater, but I don't think so.
I guess I'm a hater too. I don't see him being all NBA. Maybe in like the last 2 years of that deal of this extension, right? When he's making $37 million, he's already up into that price range. But I have a hard time just looking at the landscape of the league, and when you expect guys like Trae Young to start to pop off. I don't think Curry's going anywhere anytime soon.
You got Dame. You still
got Dame.
Kyrie.
You still have Kyrie.
James Harden's still a guard. I think Luka was registered as a guard this year too, right?
Isn't Jimmy Butler registered as a guard too still, or they finally moved him to forward?
I'm not sure about that. Well, Ja Morant's another guy that's going to end up on All-NBA. I have more confidence in him than De'Aaron Fox.
Yep. I think it's hard on Fox because again, I do like Fox and I love his potential and I think he's going to become a very good player. I think he's going to be a top 10 point guard in the league by the end of this extension, without a doubt. But I don't know if he'll be all NBA in that sense. I have a hard time.
If I was the Kings, I wouldn't necessarily be super concerned about the bonuses. And if he does hit those levels, then I'm happy about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Then he's living up to the contract. And the contract's not as bad as maybe I was being a little harsh before. I mean, like, I get it. He's a young player. You don't really have a choice in offering him the contract. My question was just more so, is he going to live up to that $37 million amount at that point of his career? Which I don't think is a guarantee, like I said.
I mean, he's 23 right now. So, 22 going to be 23. So, again, like the end of this contract, he's 28 entering the prime. So, the next contract could be the scary one depending on how he performs this one.
Yeah.
There is some news surrounding the Derrick Favors deal. It's actually a player option on that final year for the third year, which I initially said that it was a team option, but it is a player option. Very interesting on that regard. I think that Favors got a decent enough deal.
He also gives them Rudy Gobert insurance if for some reason they didn't want to max out Rudy Gobert. Like, I think they're going to, but I'm just saying if for whatever reason he's filled in before for Gobert and actually played some of his best basketball.
Well, they're not maxing out Rudy Gobert because he's eligible for the Supermax.
Well, they can still max him out. They don't have to Supermax him.
I don't think he deserves even the max. I think he deserves a shade under that, whether it's like $28 million or 26 or whatever. Giving that money to, albeit one of the best defenders of the past couple of years, he's still a limited player in certain senses of the word.
In 3 years, do you think he's going to be better than De'Aaron Fox?
Rudy Gobert?
Yeah. Because you don't want to pay Rudy Gobert $30 million, but you're okay giving De'Aaron Fox $30 million. Like,
De'Aaron Fox has the skill that matters, shot creation. Rudy Gobert needs people to create shots for him.
Player of the year, a 2-time defensive player of the year.
I think that defense. Look, I'm going to get throwed and shaded for.
Yeah, flame him.
Look, I'm a guy that wants James Harden on my team right now, and there's no defenders on the Brooklyn Nets, so defense is overrated for me.
Don't talk about Bruce Brown like that.
Joe Harris is a pretty good defender too. But Joe Harris is going to be winning Defensive Player of the Year. Maybe we can get David Nwaba back in the deal. We'll have to wait and see. I just think that shot creation is the most important skill in the NBA right now in every sense of the word. When it comes to the postseason and the regular season, if you can create a shot for yourself and others, De'Aaron Fox does that at a very high level. Rudy Gobert doesn't at all. And he gets all crybaby-ish if he doesn't get enough shots from Mike Conley in the pick and roll or Donovan Mitchell.
He does, in a sense, though, help create shots because he's such a great screen setter. Like, I think he leads the league in, like, screen assists. Not to say...
Screen assists, my God.
That is a real thing. What do you mean? Like,
screen assist to shot creation.
I'm not creating. I'm just saying it's an aspect of his game. Like, that's something he provides on the court. Like, being a good screen setter is an asset. Like, ask Joe Harris. I guarantee you, like, good screens for a shooter coming off of them is a big difference in you getting separation. And, like, hey, Rudy Gobert sets more legal screens than anybody in the NBA would. Maybe Sabonis being a close second. Yeah, I had to throw that in there. No, but, like...
You're not wrong. I mean, he moves his feet a lot, man.
Rudy Gobert does the same shit. He just, like, flares his hips out or, like, you know what I mean? He'll do, like, that little extension with his knees, but it gets separation for his teammates.
The Draymond Green screen.
Nah,
Yeah.
Draymond thinks he's a fullback. Like, he literally has had plays where he could pass for an NFL player. I'm like, bro, you are literally, like, moving around, like, shading this guy.
We didn't talk about it because it wasn't official, but I'm curious on your thoughts, Jack. If there's any signs you can touch on it. But how do you feel, Jack, about the Warriors trading for Kelly Oubre Jr. Last night to try and fill some of the hole of losing a guy like Klay Thompson?
I like it. It's obviously, it fills the hole at the trade exception, and they're getting a rotation player, essentially a better version of Andrew Wiggins. He is. I focus on the aesthetics of players a lot. Goddamn, Kelly Oubre is a sexy dude. He is one of the best looking players in the NBA, and he makes them even sexier. Infinite sexiness levels for the Golden State Warriors. As a player, I've always been a Kelly Oubre fan, partly because my guy JBT Nick has always been a big fan of his as well. Since his days in Washington. And I think, being coached well in a Steve Kerr system, Rod Adams, these sort of guys who know how to coach the scheme on both sides of the floor, I think he's going to be a valuable rotation piece. Does he replace Klay Thompson in any sense of the word? Absolutely not. But it gives him versatility in terms of, you want a guy who's a wing. Now, is it worth going paying that $17 million contract and it costs you $82 million, I think is somewhere I saw? Look, Joe Lacob apparently had a meeting with these guys, and I saw via The Athletic that he's like, you know what? I don't want anyone saying that we're tanking. We're going all in on this year. And I still think that maybe if Steph Curry can beat Steph Curry, they can maybe still sneak into some home court advantage and maybe get a 4th seed. And when it comes to at that point in time, I still think that they have a shot. But I'll be chatting about it on JBT as well. But shout out to Klay Thompson, man. That guy deserves all the goodness in the world. There's no slander on any part of the internet and beyond for a guy like Klay Thompson. Thoughts and prayers with him, and hopefully he can recover really, really soon. And if anyone's going to come back bigger and better than ever from 2 incredibly serious injuries, it's definitely Klay Thompson. So massive shout-outs to Klay.
Yeah, we shared similar thoughts yesterday on the outlet. Like you said, it sucks for Klay, and just looking at it from the Kelly Oubre situation, like, it definitely helps, and it's a piece. They're going to have to change how they play a little bit because they're so used to having 2 shooters in Steph and Klay. And, like, Kelly Oubre is a solid 3-point shooter, but he's not up to the level that Klay is. Either is Andrew Wiggins, either is Draymond Green, either is James Wiseman. So, like, I'm intrigued to see how their style of play is adjusted this year.
I'm intrigued by this, Nick. Via The Athletic, Rondé Hollis-Jefferson, former Brooklyn Net who doesn't believe in the existence of dinosaurs, I spoke about that on JBT in a really fun topic, is planning to sign with the San Antonio Spurs. What do you think?
Good for Rondé. Getting another NBA contract. I think he showed some potential with the Raptors. What is this guy, Kory? He's slipping out about something. But, Rondé, I think he'll have some success in San Antonio. Hopefully he can develop into a good bench piece. Solid player, hoping it works out. And if anyone's going to help that jump shot, it's San Antonio.
What the hell was San Antonio being against floor spacing? That's what I'm reacting. Why does San Antonio hate floor spacing? I mean, I like Rondé.
It helps with their defense, though. Their defense has been pretty bad, and they haven't really had any forward defenders. And at least Rondé is probably going to develop into a very good one. He's approaching that. He still has some work to do, but I think that's where they're looking at the skill.
Yeah, that was my reaction to that. I don't think from the floor spacing perspective of what the Spurs are doing. But again, the Spurs are one of the teams that, it's not out of the realm of possibility still that we see DeMar DeRozan or LaMarcus Aldridge moved, within the next, 72 hours, if not, soon after.
We could literally see the Spurs play a non-3-point shooting lineup. They could play DeJounte Murray. They could play DeMar DeRozan. They could play Rondé Hollis-Jefferson.
I'm not going to see. I'm not watching.
I guess LaMarcus Aldridge technically shoots threes. Jakob Poeltl doesn't really shoot threes. So, there you go. You could put out a non-spacing lineup.
I was going back and forth with someone on Twitter who said that Rondé Hollis-Jefferson could get $6 million annually. And I'm like, am I misreading things here?
He didn't even play in the postseason for the Raptors.
Yeah, I don't understand how a guy of his ilk and look, but the hyphen, we've got a hyphen on the pod right now. I'm a big fan of Rondé Hollis-Jefferson and what he's done, and I really liked him, Toronto. I thought he provided some value for them. And he can be a rotation piece for the San Antonio Spurs. I think he's going to be, a pinch hitter around the NBA for a very long time. And maybe San Antonio unlocks him in a certain sense of the word because, Kawhi Leonard didn't necessarily have a jumper, and, the shot mechanics haven't been great across his across
So
his
funny
tenure.
enough, that was like the high peak, like the crazy hot takes that people would have on draft night that Rondé could turn into Kawhi Leonard because of that reason, that he was already so good at all the other aspects, but he just didn't have the jump shot and he could develop that. Obviously, that's not going to be the case, but like you said, Jack, maybe they can fix the shooting. They've fixed a lot of shots.
Yeah, look, there's a chance, and I back the San Antonio system, probably more than any other, but we'll have to wait and see. But speaking of the Spurs, Drew Eubanks is apparently back on a 3-year deal.
Had some good moments in the bubble. Had some
He did.
highlight plays where you're like, oh, who's this guy? You've heard of his name before, but then you have something to associate it with. So that's what happened there.
Yep. Demarcus Cousins apparently is garnering some attention, according to Woj. Kory, what are some destinations that make sense for you for Demarcus Cousins? Is he getting attention because of what he's done, or do these teams know something behind the scenes that he may be a little bit more mobile and have recovered well from some of his ailments across the years, including that Achilles, which is obviously a really hard injury to recover from, especially if you're a big man?
I think you just hope that he can get back to to a portion of who he was. I think the DeMarcus Cousins we saw from Sacramento in that first half with the Pelicans, that guy's just not there. We saw in that little burst with the Warriors. Again, he got hurt again, so that was another big blow. I don't think we're seeing DeMarcus Cousins the all-star, borderline all-NBA DeMarcus Cousins. I think his days are behind him. In terms of like where he could land. I think Dwight Howard honestly declined the deal because he saw Mason Plumlee got $25 million. He was like, "Yo, no way am I not getting paid more than Mason Plumlee." So maybe Cousins ends up with the Lakers on a cheaper deal because Howard might go elsewhere. Of course, Howard still could go back to the Lakers, but I find it weird if he was the one to back out of the deal. Maybe Pelinka backed out of the deal. That's also possible, I guess. I think the Lakers make sense for Cousins. I was gonna say I could see the Celtics if things fall apart, but again, I don't know if the Celtics would want to take a risk on a guy like Boogie who might not provide any defense at this point of his career. I could see, and I don't see him go back to the Warriors. I really don't have a lot of destinations for DeMarcus Cousins that makes sense because I'm so what's the word I'm looking for? I have no idea what he looks like. I guess that's what I'm looking for. I don't know what version of DeMarcus Cousins would look like because, again, he could space the floor. He was beginning to space the floor. He's a very above-average passer for the big man position, but the defense to me was already an issue for him, and it got worse. So I have a hard time figuring out if there's a contending landing spot for him.
Yeah, I agree. I think just given his health, there's so many question marks. And like you mentioned, Kory, defensively, already a lot of question marks coming off a torn ACL. Like, how is he going to move laterally? And obviously, he wasn't a great leaper, so we're not talking about like elite rim protection here. And do you really want to commit post touches or shots to a guy that hasn't played in the NBA in a year? You know what I mean? The last time we saw him, he wasn't amazing. So there's a lot of question marks. I think it depends on what Cousins wants. Does he want to just tag along to a contender and be maybe that third center that doesn't really play unless there's an injury? Or does he want to have an opportunity to prove that he's still an elite NBA player? If that's the case, maybe going to a bad team, like you mentioned before, Jack, Washington. Maybe even a team like Charlotte. Like, hey, it's a star player, bring him in, he can get a lot of touches. Pretty much any bad team. Like, it just makes sense for them to go after Cousins.
Detroit.
Yeah, Detroit. They love their centers. Maybe he can play a little bit point center for him. So, I don't know. I just have a hard time seeing a contending team committing to giving DeMarcus Cousins minutes next year.
Yeah. I mean, and, only two teams I can think of, in the Texas area that maybe
Houston.
Could throw. Yeah, Houston, if they're looking, because again, they're in a cap situation in which they could get DeMarcus Cousins on the cheap, and maybe he provides something for them. Now, again,
or it's a name.
Right. I don't know if necessarily James Harden goes, "Oh wow, yeah, DeMarcus Cousins, I'm staying, guys. Way to go, you did it. You did everything I needed." But also, the Mavericks have always wanted Cousins. Maybe the Mavericks take a flyer on him. I think those days are probably past too. But that would be the extent of contending teams I see in which Cousins being linked.
Anywhere else for you, Jack?
Apparently the Rondé Hollis Jefferson news is fake. I've fallen for a fake one.
Oh,
so,
you fool.
That's on me.
I still just don't understand. I just don't understand why people would just spend time doing that. It's so crazy. Especially, no disrespect, Rondé, like we said, we love him. But, you're making fake tweets about Rondé Hollis Jefferson. Like, if you're going to do it about Fred VanVleet or, like, someone big or something, like, that's going to, like, create a splash.
They're doing it so people like us fall for it.
Yeah.
And I get to react about San Antonio Spurs spacing when there wasn't an issue.
But, Jack, nothing really else going on. We're going to wrap it up.
Yeah, there's nothing else really going on here.
Like I said, I believe the team, whatever team complained about tampering, I'm blaming them for making this free agency period not exciting, at least to start. So shout out to them for ruining our fun. Kory, Jack, always a pleasure. Big thanks to everybody for checking in, dropping questions, updates, news, whatever it was. We appreciate it. And who knows, we might be dropping one of these live shows very, very soon.